Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host Khalid. But today is the 16th of August 2023 and these are the stories that we will be discussing in detail during the course of the show. We'll begin with the 2 years since the US withdrawal from Afghanistan. What have these 2 years brought to the interim government of the Afghan Taliban? At the same time, how important is the occupation of Afghanistan by the US as a lesson for all conflicts in the world, as has been said in the latest report to the Congress by the US Special Inspector General for Afghanistan, John F. Spoko. There are many things that need to be considered when it comes to the 2 years since the US left Afghanistan. We'll try to decipher a bit of that during the course of our first segment. Our second story today, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the relationship between the United States of America and Iran. On the one hand, there is the Israel factor that continues to influence the United States. On the other hand, there is the JCPOA as well. On the third, there's also this somehow hope that the US and Iran will rekindle their ties one way or the other, and there have been certain reports in that context as well, and also the fact that some prisoners, the US prisoners that were held in Iran, have now been moved from the jail to a house arrest, and that has been taken as a positive development by the United States of America. How that will affect the relations, how will the relations improve or can improve in the weeks and the years to come is going to be our second segment. Then we'll be talking about another incident of the desecration of our Holy Quran that has again happened in Sweden. And the fact remains that there is a continuous spate of such incidents that have been happening in the last couple of months, maybe with a deliberate strategy or not, but the fact remains that this is a holy book like any other holy book, and that needs to be preserved, the sanctity of which also needs to be preserved. Then we'll be talking about violence that has erupted in Jarawala over blasphemy incidents. Multiple churches have been vandalized in the area. Our caretaker Prime Minister has also vowed stern action against these culprits. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be talking about Saima Mohsin. She used to work for CNN, and then CNN terminated her contract in 2017, and now she has won the right to sue the CNN in one of the courts. She has also severely criticized the US broadcaster CNN as to their policies towards people like her. Now she has won the right to sue CNN. Let's see what happens, how much she can or she will be able to get from the CNN. But nevertheless, she has gone through a severe mental depression and torture because of the termination of her contract for no fault of hers. Let's begin with our first segment, and that concerns the withdrawal of the US troops from Afghanistan that happened 2 years ago. Since these 2 years, a lot of developments had happened, some for the positive, some not. More in the following report.
Afghanistan marked 2 years of U.S. forces withdrawal from the country as thousands of Afghans grapple with uncertainty, diplomatic isolation, and challenging economic situation. Despite reassurances by the Taliban de facto authorities that any restrictions, particularly in terms of access to education, would be temporary, the facts on the ground have demonstrated marginalization of Afghan women. In his latest report to the Congress, U.S. Special Inspector General for Afghanistan, John F. Spoko, said that the U.S. experience in Afghanistan continues to offer many important lessons for other conflicts in the world today, as well as future conflicts. Helping address Afghanistan's ongoing humanitarian and economic crisis is an urgent priority for Pakistan, as it has been advocating engagement with the Afghan government. Recently, U.S. Special Envoy for Afghanistan, Tom West, held talks with the Taliban team led by the Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muqtai in Qatar in July. Despite Pakistan's concerns at safe havens of the banned Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan in Afghanistan, Taliban officials are not acting decisively against the terror proxies. Pakistan has been stressing the importance of abiding by the Doha Agreement, under which the Afghan Taliban agreed to not let their territory be used against any other country. The seriousness of the humanitarian and economic conditions in Afghanistan requires a strong and coordinated response from the international community.
Brigadier Rashid Wali Janjua, who's a senior analyst, joins us online. Sir, thank you very much to have joined us. Let's talk a little bit about these 2 years, what Afghanistan has gained, what it hasn't, and what the world has gained as a result of the US troop pullout as well. Now, the US Secretary of State, Sir Anthony Blinken, says, and I quote, "Withdrawing troops from Afghanistan was the right decision." What, in your point of view, are the enduring US commitments that need or that have to be fulfilled?
Thank you, Omar. I think the 2 years are very clear that the international community has seen return of Taliban rule, and Americans made a precipitate withdrawal. That withdrawal was not commented favorably at that point of time also, and people were a little apprehensive that without making proper arrangements for an interim constitution, and without taking all the stakeholders on board about the future constitutional scheme of Afghanistan, if Americans are withdrawing, then obviously the ones with the biggest gun would have the vacuum, and that is what precisely happened. Despite what was going on at Qatar between Taliban and Americans, the Ashraf Ghani government was till last hoping to cobble together some kind of a national consensus on which no progress was made. And I think once this precipitate withdrawal took place, it was only natural that the Taliban interim government will come with its own flavor, with its own preferences, and that is what precisely happened. Despite their verbal, discussions, commitments, the international community was reassured time and again that an inclusive government would be made. The human rights and women and education related aspects, which are sensitivities of international community, would be properly assuaged. That did not come to pass as per the expectations of the international community. On the part of Taliban, they have many pluses to showcase, which they showcase quite often, like there is now a single entity controlling the whole of Afghanistan, uh, despite the presence of elements like ISKP and TTP. The whole Afghanistan is now under one, administration. But the international community is not satisfied. The reasons are multifarious. They have not accorded recognition, and the recognition has not been accorded. That means that the Afghan government is still a pariah in the eyes of international community. There's no formal trade. There's no formal banking transactions happening. That happens, the country which is already struggling uh, with its economic issues, and it also faces humanitarian problems quite regularly, will never come strongly as a stable country on international firmament. Taliban, despite the entreaties of international community, have their own version of inclusivity. They say that, look, we have included all ethnicities, including Tajiks, including Hazaras, into our cabinet, but that doesn't mean that we include the people who are against us, who are against our interests, into our cabinet. So that's the sticking point about inclusivity. And there's the issue of education. The university education has been banned, and of late, as of now, the entrance to university tests has also been banned. Now, these are those things that the international community and the human rights organizations are very concerned about, and that does not read down to the advantage of Afghan government when it comes to international efforts for
That is true, Rashid Saab. But the fact also remains that you talk about challenges. The challenges wherein on the one hand, there are a lot of challenges for the world vis-a-vis their relationship with the Afghan interim government. There are also a lot of challenges for the Afghan interim government, and also the whole 20 years of US or NATO troops in Afghanistan as well. I'd like to refer to what the US Special Inspector General for Afghanistan, Mr. Spoko, said, that the US experience in Afghanistan continues to offer many lessons for other conflicts in the world. In your point of view, what went wrong as far as the US-Afghan strategy was concerned? And as Mr. Spoko said, it can serve as a lesson. What lessons have been learned?
You see, there are two, three very important themes that resonate again and again. And one is that even during the Bill Clinton's time, there was an opportunity to take care of the terrorism by decapitating its leadership. OBL was let free. Then during the Obama times, they say that no time frame should have been given without a clear structure that had to be put in place. And once the time frame was given, then the ones who are waging a war of resistance, they become very aggressive, and they know that it's only a matter of time that these foreign occupation forces would leave our country. And that is why the criticism comes on Americans that they, instead of concentrating on counter-terrorism, finishing their job properly, they took their eyes off the ball, and they prioritized another conflict first. They went to Iraq war, diverting resources from Afghanistan in 2003, 4. And after that, another major mistake was that they went into the nation building project, which all the analysts and several SIGA reports clearly point out that was a big failure. They could not create Afghan national security defense forces. They could not create a viable justice system. They could not create a sustainable business environment and a sustainable economy. And these nation building efforts were a major digression which cost Americans very heavily. And at the end of the day, once the political pressure mounted on the Trump administration to bring the boys home, he took a very hasty decision to announce that we'll be giving a time frame in which we'll bring our boys back. That was a political ploy to gain the political mileage, all right, but that did not make the strategic sense, because once you are into a project and you are into a country where you have invested $1 trillion and your nation building project is in tatters, then you must find a way. And the regional countries forum was available. They should have discussed, they should have made a structure of at least Afghan constitution that all stakeholders could have agreed upon, and then in phases this withdrawal should have been effected. It was a precipitate withdrawal. So the two mistakes I pointed out: one, that instead of going for the real objective of counterterrorism and then handing it back to the most viable government in Afghanistan as per the aspirations of people of Afghanistan, they went into a nation building project about which they were not very clear. Their objectives were quite nebulous. They were wasteful. There was a profligate waste of money, and there are stories of corruption also. The money was funneled back to the contractors, and some of them went back to the carpetbaggers who were there in this Afghan situation, making a lot of money out of the contracts and actually delivering little on ground for the people of Afghanistan.
Rashid Saab, have lessons been learnt?
I don't think so. Those lessons have been, pointed out, and whether they have been learnt, it will take another intervention on part of a superpower to prove that whether they have learnt or not. But lessons are in front of everybody. There are a lot of books that have been written. Even McMaster has written about the account, and those commanders who have actually served in Afghanistan, they have also resonated the same themes. That instead of a very nebulous, costly, without clear objectives, this nation-building, project in which they were trying to recast Afghan society as per the Western, principles, that did not come to pass, and that would never have come to pass because they did not carry out a deep analysis of what is the indigenous, homespun and nationalistic flavor of the Afghan society, and how can the development, progress and counterterrorism help could be given to such a society. So that was
Rashid Saab, you talk about a nebulous, costly decision, especially to reconstruct or invest in the reconstruction of Afghanistan, which of course proved to be counterproductive. At the same time, you talk of the hasty decision taken by the Trump government for the US withdrawal of forces when things were going in a certain mechanism, in a certain flow. How has that withdrawal also impacted security in the region?
Withdrawal has impacted security in the region in the context of availability of non-state actors who are still there. Americans were there, and ISKP had started gaining ground. So they were attacking, they were fighting Afghan Taliban, they were fighting Pakistani law enforcement agencies, and all those elements. They, once the Americans left, they left in such a hurry that they abandoned a lot of equipment and the hardware, the military hardware. All that has gone into the hands of these non-state actors, and everybody that would lay hands on those weapons now, the entire region is flush with arms. So that's a security hazard, a consequence of this precipitate withdrawal. And then the economy part and the humanitarian aspects. The economy is in such a bad shape that Afghanistan needs humanitarian aid. Pakistan chipped in with 2.7 billions from September 21 to September 22 in a 1 year's window. Pakistan did its best by sending 88 aid convoys, by providing the banking support services, by providing traditional, concessional trade also. But there is a limit to considering our own economic conditions. These are two major vulnerabilities in Akale Seal. One is economy, one is the presence of non-state actors which were not taken care of, and then a lot of weapons proliferation. The weapons which could have been handled properly, could have been disposed of properly and safely, those were spread all over, dumped, and this dump and leave policy has left Afghanistan more destabilized.
And of course, this weapon proliferation, traces of which we still continue to see in the region. And you talked about, the influx, and we are also seeing the influx of TTP in Pakistan through the various mechanisms that they have used in order to destabilize Pakistan. Now, earlier in our conversation, you talked about the Afghan interim government refusing to join hands or shake hands with those who they were against, or those who were against them. Zalmay Khalilzad, I'd like to refer to what he said recently. He has offered a new proposal to pacify Afghanistan by urging the Afghan politicians who are living in exile to return to their country to make a unity government and negotiate with the Taliban. Is that possible?
To me, it's not possible because the ground situation is quite different. On ground, there is a national resistance front which is being propped up by support from the West, especially from countries like countries of European Union. There is a conduit of logistic support to them, erstwhile Northern Alliance. So that resistance front, though it does not pose a very serious threat to Taliban, but it's a big nuisance. And that creates a constant instability in Afghanistan. Then saying that we will help you attain the desired inclusivity is quite puerile. I think they don't understand Afghan fabric of society, because if the Taliban, who are mainly comprising the Pashtun ethnicity, they have displayed their understanding of inclusivity by including, Hazara, including Tajiks into their fold, but they would never have any truck with those who fought against them and who actually were instrumental in jailing and incarcerations which led to the casualties of Taliban. So those are memories that still rankle with the rank and file of Taliban. And I don't think so Khalilzad's formula of inclusivity will gain much traction with Afghan Taliban. They have their own understanding, and I think international community should remain engaged, like the regional countries are doing their best. Pakistan is engaging on all diplomatic levels to develop a better understanding of the Taliban regime's understanding of inclusivity and slowly help them engage with the international community rather than imposing the external solutions on them, which will definitely never work.
All right, Rashid Saab, my next question has two parts. The first, what as an option if the Taliban agree to the human rights questions that the West has posed them and agree to them, what if they let the women rejoin the educational institutions and open the educational institutions for them and the workspace as well, and also ensure that the Afghan territory is never used for terrorist activities against any neighborhood country as well? I mean, this is an option. A, can the Taliban agree to this? B, if they do agree, do you feel that the West will return as far as the cooperating with Afghanistan is concerned?
I think if there are tangible, if they walk the talk, mere overtures would not do, verbal overtures would not do. Afghan interim government has to display its seriousness by taking the concrete, tangible steps to allow the women back into the universities and higher education. And they have to, display their efficacy in preventing the use of their territory for acts of terrorism. Something very encouraging has just happened, that their spiritual and temporal leader, Mullah Hibtullah Khunzada, has very clearly given an edict in which he has very clearly laid out the vision of the Afghan interim government. That is, anybody that goes and fights on Pakistan's territory and gets killed, even their funeral rites would not be legate. So this is a there's a tectonic shift in their attitude and policies. And they have verbalized it, and it is a very reassuring sign. And if on the similar lines, they open up on human rights issues, be a little more inclusive, allow women's education, allow the women to work with the, some of the NGOs that they were earlier working with, and relax some of their very stringent, strict moral strictures, I think the international community would be quite receptive to engage.
All right. All right, let's talk of engagement. This is my last question. It has two parts again. The first, Tom West met with the Afghan interim government leaders recently in Doha, which means that there's some kind of an engagement still going on between the US or the West and Afghanistan. Secondly, the C5+1 meeting in Astana, Kazakhstan, where US and 5 Central Asian countries also met to discuss Afghanistan and how to stabilize it. What should be the framework in order to move forward in the right direction as far as helping Afghanistan is concerned, from both the sides, from the West and from Afghanistan itself?
Yes, there have been forums like Astana process, and there has been a C5+1. To me, the best forum would be a regional forum in which the countries which are the major stakeholders like Pakistan, Russia, Iran, and China, they all are included in that, and the United States is added into that. So that forum is, to my mind, going to be most effective forum to engage with the Taliban regime and to ensure that international community accords some kind of legitimacy and engages with the Afghans and breaks their isolation. And I think on the structure wise, that is the forum that I think is going to be the most effective forum. On bilateral and trilateral fronts, Pakistan, China, Afghanistan forums are already existing. Pakistan, Iran, Afghanistan forums have also been working. But I think the inclusion of countries like United States, China, Russia, and Iran, that would make the forum more broad-based, more efficacious. And regarding the concessions to the world by the Taliban, I think they have to look very seriously at these issues of human rights, and they must show the requisite flexibility. And outside the media glare, Pakistan should keep engaging, prodding, helping, and encouraging them to engage more openly with the international community. And in many ways, this has already been done, and some fruits of the efforts are visible in the shape of Hibtullah's statement.
I think Mr. Hibtullah's statement, Rashid Saab, is a very constructive one. Let's hope that this actually results into a long-term stability in the form of non-intrusive efforts by TTP and other non-state actors to intrude into other countries such as Pakistan. If that happens, and if more continues, I think we are on for a future where Afghanistan could be stable, and the relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan and the West could also stabilize. Thank you so very much, Brigadier Retired Rashid Wali Janjua Saab, senior analyst, who have joined us and to have talked to us about this very important topic. 2 years after the US withdrawal from Afghanistan, what are the lessons that the world has learned? What are the lessons that Afghanistan has learned, and how to move forward with all of it? Thank you, sir. Thank you very much to have joined us. Let's come to our second story, and that concerns the relationship between the United States and Iran. With is on the one hand JCPOA, there are talks it might resume, it might not resume. The role of Joe Biden has been very important as far as the JCPOA is concerned. On the other hand, there are also other issues like the American prisoners in Iran that have now moved from a jail to house arrest that the US feels is a constructive step, and it wants the release of these American prisoners. Will the relationship that is quite dicey or complicated, let's put it that way, between Iran and the United States of America be less simpler in the days to come? More in the following report.
U.S.-Iran have experienced heightened tensions since 2018, when the former U.S. President Donald Trump nixed a multilateral deal that saw Tehran scale back its nuclear program in exchange for the lifting of sanctions against its economy. President Joe Biden came into the office early 2021 on a promise to revive the Iran nuclear accord, formerly known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. But as several rounds of indirect negotiations failed to restore the pact, Washington continued to enforce its sanctions regime against Tehran and piled on more penalties. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said that the United States policy of deterrence against Iran has not changed despite signs of a looming prisoner swap between the two countries. Antony Blinken added that the United States remains committed that Iran would never acquire a nuclear weapon. Last week, Iran transferred 4 dual U.S.-Iranian nationals incarcerated in Tehran's Ivan prison to house arrest. The transfer is reportedly the first step in a sequence that will ultimately secure the freedom of 5 U.S. citizens. In exchange, Iran will be able to tap into nearly $6 billion of its existing foreign assets for carefully monitored expenditures on food and medicine. There has been no indication that the prisoner deal would spur movement on restoring the 2015 Iran nuclear accord, but it seems a positive step towards restoring the U.S.-Iran ties.
Dr. Munawar Hussain, who is an expert in international affairs, joins us online. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, to have joined us. Dr. Saab, since Trump nixed the JCPOA, and now that there is another government of Biden that has tried to revive the JCPOA some way or the other, how do you feel has the JCPOA affected, or whether the US going out of it and now trying to revive it, how has that affected the US-Iran relationship, and do you feel optimistic about the future of these two countries?
Thank you very much for having me in the show. Let me first of all point out the trends in the history of US-Iran relationship. Historically, this relationship moved from a strategic partnership to antagonism and rivalry. And few people, they know that the pronouncement of containment policy by the Harry Truman, the then American president, was on the issue of Soviet intervention into Iran, Turkey, and Greece. Then we observed in the past that Iran remained a strategically very significant country for American interest in the Middle East, which U.S. pursued through a policy of twin pillar strategy. And this twin pillar strategy consisted 2 countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia, and they were considered like the American policemen in the region. However, Iranian Revolution in 1979, which was an effect of the series of revolutionary attempts during Mossaddeq's times and then the revolutionary attempt in 1964, relationship turned into rivalry because it introduced a new system by the Iranians that was anti-global powers domination in the area. So the fear was that revolution would have domino effect on Iraq, on Pakistan, and other neighboring nations. So then we observed the series of events that eroded confidence between these two nations, like the U.S. embassy was attacked in Tehran by the Iranian people, and they made U.S. diplomats hostage. Then we observed Iran-Iraq war, and then U.S. rhetoric on Iranian nuclear ambition, and then Iranian opposing U.S. role in the region and beyond. And now U.S. imposed sanctions against Iran, and now blaming on Iran that Iranians, they are intercepting and seizing international ships in international water. So these are the issues which is basically turning relationship into antagonism, and this relationship can be improved. However, we also observed cooperation in the past, which we usually say in academic language that there is a general conflict, but there is certain specific cooperation. Like we observed cooperation in war and terror in Afghanistan, war in Iraq, then the GCPO, which you are asking question.
JCPOA,
yes, during President Obama's administration. And this was a constructive engagement because President Obama believed that through having constructive engagement with Iran, we can improve our relationship. And this is the quality of the Democrat Party. Whenever they come into power, they have a very complex decision-making process through which they make enemies always friends. So this was a good attempt that later on derailed by President Trump.
We know after Trump derailing the JCPOA, Joe Biden came back in 2021, Dr. Saab, with one of the pledges being to revive the JCPOA. Will that happen?
Yes, when Joe Biden Saab came into power in 2021, he promised that he would revive it, but many negotiations were carried on, but they failed. And why they failed? Because of the objection by the U.S. allies in the region, and that is Israel. And there are certain issues because of this human rights issue between the two nations, and Americans, they blame that Iranians, they are violating women's rights and human rights, and the issue of nuclear proliferation, and then Iranian cooperation with China, the strategic cooperation, and they are providing drones to Russia in the Ukrainian war. So these are the irritants on which this relationship remained hostile, and the negotiations remained failed. Because when you are sitting on negotiation table, you go for give and take, and here I think there is a problem.
All right, when you talk of a problem as far as give and take is concerned, let's also talk about the prisoner swap deal that is apparently being negotiated between Iran and the US as per several reports from media outlets. What are the tentative terms of this deal in your point of view?
I think again there would be a give and take because Iranians they have introduced measures which are relaxing these prisoners. They have shifted them from prison to house arrest, I think. And in exchange, they are demanding the opening of freeze assets, and especially the international media. They are quoting that the Iranians would have an access to $6 billion, which were freezed in South Korea, and these funds would be available for Iranians for humanitarian purposes. I mean, I think this negotiation is going on these terms, and Iranians ultimately would be able to get the benefit out of this because of the fact that if we see the trends in US and Iran in the past, when Iranians they were weak militarily and economically, they tried to contain American moves in the region, but now Iranians they have capable enough because of their strategic cooperation with China and having $400 billion investment from the Chinese in Iran, and then their cooperation with Russia, and then selling their weapons in international markets, especially the drones and other military equipment. So, and then their approachment with the Soviet Union with the help of China, Iraq, and Pakistan. I think Iranians, they are capable enough, and Americans, they understand this. And Americans, they are already engaged on Ukrainian fronts. They have tension on South China water and on the issue of Taiwan. So Americans, they don't have ability in this moment to afford another antagonism in Gulf area.
All right. If you say that the US cannot, have another antagonism in the Middle East area, what then happens if this prisoner swap deal goes through? Will it open the doors for a new chapter of relations between the US and Iran, or Iran and the West?
I think so, because West is going through the process of economic recession because of the Ukrainian war, and then Iranians, they are getting capability. And third, as I already mentioned, that US is engaged on Ukrainian war front and other fronts like I mentioned in South China water and on the issue of Taiwan. So we can hope. And then it was the electoral promise by the Democrat Party that when they would come into power, they would revive this deal, because Democrats always, as I mentioned, they go for making enemies friends. And they have a very complex decision-making process. It is quite opposite to the Republican Party, which they have a very simple policy-making process in which they believe that if somebody is enemy, bomb them. So therefore, we observed when President Trump was in power, he pronounced that they would attack 52 places of Iran. And later on, they could not do this. But whenever Democrats, they come into power, they go for constructive engagement because they want to promote a liberal agenda in international system. And they want to promote human rights and democracy and friendship. So this is the reason, I think.
Dr. Saab, also there is a report in the Wall Street Journal that talks about Iran significantly reducing its uranium enrichment. A, do you feel Iran is adhering by the JCPOA? B, do you feel that this or could pave the way for a positive US or Western reaction as far as the strained relations with Iran are concerned?
But sir, when there was a deal of JCPOA, this deal was basically that Iranians would scale down upgradation of their uranium process, and in exchange, Americans, they would ease the sanctions against Iran and even the European nations. And because of cancellation of this deal during Trump administration, there was a fear that Iran, they are upgrading their uranium up to the weapon level. And some Western scientists, they believe that Iranians, they got this capability already. So therefore, this was a fear, and especially this was a fear in the region because American alliance, they have a sense of insecurity because of Iranian nuclear weapon. In the past, Iranians, they pursued to have this capability because of their security needs. Even they came into contact with Pakistan in 1980s, and Pakistan refused to support Iran in that case. And now, since there is a hope that this deal is going to be negotiated again successfully, and the things which are coming through international media that they are negotiating on the prisoners and defreezing of Iranian assets, these are the good signs. I think this can go ahead. But to believe that Iranians, they are scaling down the upgradation of uranium is not confirmed report, and therefore the Secretary of the State, American Secretary of the State, Mr. Blinken, said that this is not a confirmed report.
All right. I'd also like to refer to a statement by Iran's Ministry of Foreign Affairs that say that the process of releasing several billion dollars of Iranian assets that you've referred to as well, which had been illegally frozen by the US in South Korea, has now begun. Do you feel if this begins and does not stop, do you feel it is going to have a positive impact on Iran's economy? And do you feel this will also pave the way for a beginning of economic relationship between the West and Iran?
Yes, of course. And this is not the first precedent. I think in the case of Iraq, Americans, they gave a green signal to Iraqis to give payment to Iranians in dollars because Iranians, they supplied them gas to Iraq in the recent past. So this is a good sign again, and I hope that the relationship would be improved between the West and the Iran. And as I already mentioned, that Americans, they don't have ability to have hostility with Iran, and Iran has become more engaged with international community and is more capable in terms of diplomacy. If Americans, they have a strategy of pressurizing Iran through diplomacy and deterrence, Iran, they are countering it through the policy of containment through diplomacy and deterrence against, which we can say CDD. So the Iranians, they are very successful in that, and Iranians, they are famous for diplomatic negotiations. So I hope so. These are the good signs, and if such negotiations are failed, it would not be good for the region because the security situation in the region is improving. We are observing in the case of Afghanistan that all different nations, neighboring nation of Afghanistan, they are trying hard to bring stability in Afghanistan and to deal with the issue of terrorism. Then we observed the rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And then we also observed the calmness between warring factions in Yemen, relatively more stability in the case of Iraq and Syria.
The improvement of relations between the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Iran, how can we not forget that? I mean, and of course, due to the efforts made by China. Finally, Dr. Munawar, I'd like to understand, on the one hand, you talk about the, the Democrats trying to have a positive impact as far as the relations with those countries where the relationships were strained in the past. But on the same time, we also see a lot of Republicans which are making a huge hue and cry on the same thing, on the same facet of the democratic strategic impact of this relationship with countries that had not been good in the past, that and Israel, that have been pressurizing, that are now pressurizing the Biden government. Do you feel that is going to have any impact?
The Republicans, if they have a hue and cry, it is all because of their electoral politics, and we all know that their elections are coming the next year. So therefore, in order to attract the vote in American society, and we all know that Israeli lobby is very strong in America, and especially in their media and education and economy. So therefore, I think this is the reason due to which they have such rhetoric. Otherwise, it is not in the interest of America, as I mentioned again and again, that Americans don't have ability and capability at this moment to have a conflict and antagonism on different fronts in this world. Already they are spending a lot of money on Ukrainian war. They are affording tension in the case of China and South China and Taiwan issue. They cannot do it. And American alliance, they don't have a capability to stand with America. We observed in the case of India, could they fight against Chinese in Ladakh? And what do you know about the Western nations? Are they all agree with the American policies in the case of Ukraine war? Apparently they are. But they have certain reservations because they are suffering because of their economic recession. So I don't believe that in terms of rhetoric, it is true that Republicans, they would have this rhetoric because of their...
So will Israel. So will Israel. We all know about the hatred that Israel has as far as Iran is concerned.
This is the most interesting thing is that the development which is going on in the Gulf area, in the overall Middle Eastern region, it is taken as a failure of Israeli policy. If there was a rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, again it was criticized within Israel that it was a failure of Israeli policy. So Israelis, they feel insecure because if there is rapprochement and peace and prosperity in the region, definitely the Palestinian movement would be more stronger in that case. Iranians, they would have a free hand to support the Palestinians' freedom fighter, let me say in this way. So
let's hope, Dr. Saab, let's hope that this rapprochement that you talk about, this easing of relations between the US and Iran actually takes place, whether it be at the expense of Israel. I think in the long run, the whole world will benefit from an easing of relations between the US and Iran, and so will Iran benefit as far as a resumption of its relations with the global north is concerned. And it's important to have stability in the face of such conflicts that we are watching right now, for example, Russia, Ukraine. Thank you very much, Dr. Munawar, to have joined us, to have talked to us about this very important topic, that is the relationship between the US and Iran. We all hope, we all wish for positive developments as that is concerned. Let's come to our last three stories. The first is the desecration of our holy book, that is the Holy Quran, that has again happened in Sweden. Another incident has happened outside the Swedish royal palace in the capital, Stockholm. The incident has taken place on Monday. This is the second time in a matter of weeks that Salwan Momika and Salwan Najim have desecrated the Holy Quran. And this is something that has been going on despite the fact that there has been a lot of hue and cry from all the quarters, including from Pakistan. The fact remains that such incidents of desecration of holy books is going on under the guise of religious freedom. Is it religious freedom? This is a whole question mark as far as incidents such as these are concerned, and I hope that countries such as Sweden take the necessary action as far as the desecration of any holy book, whether it be the Holy Quran or the Bible or the Torah is concerned. Let's come to our next story, and that concerns the violence that has erupted in Janjua. Now an enraged mob vandalized multiple churches in the Janjua Tehsil of Faisalabad over blasphemy allegations. Christian leader said the crowd torched at least 5 churches and looted valuables from houses that had been abandoned by their owners. Newly appointed interim Prime Minister also Anwarul Kakar Saab has said stern action will be taken against those who violate the law and target minorities. Former Interior Minister Rana Sanaullah has also condemned the dastardly attack and has stressed that the culprit should be brought to justice at the earliest. The fact remains that such incidents should, before they go to such conclusions, need to be thoroughly examined whether there is an incident of blasphemy or not, and if so, it is between the law enforcing agencies and the culprit, and not for people to take things into their own hands. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, CNN journalist Saima Mohsin, she has been in the news for quite some time. She was with the CNN for quite some time. She was in Pakistan as well, in fact, a couple of years back, and in 2017 CNN terminated her contract. The fact remained that she contested that, saying that she became physically disabled because of the fault of a cameraman of CNN while reporting on one incident, and since then CNN has not been cooperative with her. She then tried to go to multiple fora to try to find a logical conclusion, to sue CNN as well, and now she has finally succeeded. She can now sue the CNN despite a different methodology that CNN did use for her not to go to this level, but she has managed to do that. Let's see what happens as far as her suing CNN is concerned. How much will CNN pay off for an employee that it laid off in 2017 because of conditions that Saima Mohsin says are against the basic policies of the rights of any journalist or any human being for that matter. She calls it racist, she calls it, there are many other terms that she has used as far as that is concerned. But justice is the essence, and justice delayed is justice denied. So let's hope justice comes to Saima Mohsin before it's way too late. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom. See you inshallah tomorrow with new story segments that pertain to us. You in Pakistan, stay safe. Allah Hafiz.